Hello and welcome to our presentation of Enhancing Education After COVID. My name is Samuel Lakey. I'll be introducing my team and our project. So let's go ahead and get started. Our team, under the direction of Dr. Cynthia Furse, is Izzy, Ava, and myself. We worked really hard this last 3 months to prepare information and data for teachers across the United States and maybe even perhaps across the globe in response to the COVID pandemic. The purpose of our project was to gather data and to gather information from students and teachers on how their transition from in-classroom to online teaching went. We would like to use this information to better prepare students and faculty members in the fall and in the future for further online courses. I will start us off by starting with communication, what students want, things that were good that students got during the semester, and also some things that perhaps they wanted during the semester they didn't get. Then Izzy will follow with course elements, and then to finalize this presentation, we'll have Eva explaining student communication gaps. Communication, what students want. Students want teachers to communicate clearly, concisely, and in a timely manner. These 3 specific points help students be successful. Let's take a look at all 3 of these and learn why they help students succeed. Clear communication. Plain and simple. If the students don't understand what the teacher is teaching, then there's no possible way for the student to be able to succeed in the classroom. I found that in a lot of the Zoom meetings, sometimes the communication was not clear, either because the tools were not there or because the teachers did not communicate the content very well. Content is understood best when taught as though the listener had never learned of the material beforehand. This was mentioned several times by several students. One particularly wanted to emphasize on the clarity of the subject and said that lectures are easily understandable and the material all makes sense. That was a student that was very grateful for the online transition. Concise communication. A problem teachers ran into by moving online and transitioning is that they no longer had the time to be able to put all the information they wanted to in their classrooms. They now had to make smaller videos and had to really shorten up that information. A lot of students needed this information to be shorter so that they could have the flexibility of watching it whenever they needed to. Concise information can even be how the Canvas page is set up. This can influence students. The announcements and discussions on Canvas are very helpful. These are clear, concise ways that teachers can communicate with their students, telling them what they need done in a very short way. In fact, a very good rule to follow is a 3-click rule on the Canvas page. If you cannot click to whatever you're trying to get within 3 clicks, then it's way too long and you have too much information, and that's when students start to fail. 3-click rule is homepage, subsection, content. A lot of students found that having this 3-click rule in place was very helpful. Another student said, just be more clear on when things are going to be and also where to find them. These are very important things to the student. Last but not least, timely communication. If you say that something is due the next day, but it's already the next day, then the students can't turn it in. So it's very important that teachers have timely communication. If it is not there, they cannot do it. One student said a consistent homework quiz schedule would be beneficial to me so that I can schedule homework times and quiz study times. This is very important considering that with this pandemic, a lot of jobs had to change and a lot of schedules had to change, and so the flexibility was needed. There is a place and a time for everything. Another student said there's enough explanation through the lecture. Also, the length of the lecture is shorter, which is because the lecture is not interactive and there's no need for writing on the board and we can go faster. This flexibility is even more vital as we move to online learning.
While Sam is looking at communication overall and what students want, I'm looking at a little bit more of a specific section of this. So I'm looking at course elements and how they are connected to one another, and then how professors can communicate that to their students. To me, this relationship of course elements was something that became prevalent pretty quickly. A lot of students seemed to think that it was pretty important. An online module from UC Davis essentially is teaching people how to teach effectively in online settings. And this online module identified 3 separate types of interaction within a classroom. The first one is student to faculty, the next one is student to student, and the final one is student to content. So here are some quotes. On the right, we have a student who says, "Continue to relate the lectures to the homework as much as you can," as well as a student who says, "I appreciate that you are closely following the text." These 2 students were having positive experiences with their professors who were forging those connections between different parts of the class, between the lecture and the text, or the homework and the lecture. And then on the bottom left, the student says, "It would be nice if the lab material lined up better with the lectures." While on the top left, this is the quote that really stood out to me the most. And the student says, "Something needs to change to weave the class together. So attending lectures is beneficial to doing homework, and doing homework is beneficial to understanding the concepts." So these 2 students on the left definitely had more negative experiences in terms of the connections of course elements, and they are asking for a better communication of those elements. Before we kind of recommend what is really important to focus on in terms of these connections, I need to make clear that this is not a problem that was created by COVID and the transition to online. It is something that existed, has probably always existed in classes. We saw that it was prevalent both in the surveys before and after the transition to online. There are many different ways that we can connect different parts of a class to make learning more effective for students. One of them is lecture to lab, if of course the class has a lab. And on the right is a quote from a student who says, "It is also helpful when the lab concepts are discussed and connected to the lecture concepts. It's something pretty simple, but can be really helpful to students' learning." Lecture to textbook is another really important one. We have 2 quotes. One student said, "I find that once we go through it in the lecture, then it is much easier to understand the text." And another said, "It would be useful if each lecture you could let us know where we should be at in the reading to be ready for the next lecture." Next, we have lecture to homework and other assessments like tests and quizzes. So one student said, "The problems seem very separated from the lectures, so it's like we're doing an assignment that is completely different." And then another one said, "It would be helpful to go over problems like we would see on our homework and quizzes." It's just very important for students to know that what they're being taught in lectures is applicable to any practical use that they would encounter. And then another way, and another important thing, is to draw clear lines between different ways of learning. So the one student here says, "If the theory was tied more into the problem solving, that would be perfect for my learning." So in a lot of classes, you have the more theory side and then the more practical real life application, and connecting those is really important for students. And then the final one that I'm listing, but is definitely not the last of all the ways that you can connect parts of your classes, but this one is to connect to the available resources, either that you have in your class or outside resources that may be of assistance to students. It's really just important to know that there are resources available, and for the professor to communicate those to them. Thank you so much for listening, and now it's time for Eva and her section.
Hi, I'm Eva, and I'm going to be talking about the gaps between student to faculty communication. So, in the student to faculty post COVID surveys, we noticed some really interesting gaps between how students and faculty perceived the challenges students faced. One of the key things is that they very much agreed on things like internet access and access to a computer, but on problems like personal motivation or lack of sleep, there was a really big gap that faculty underestimated these problems. And in looking further, we noticed that these challenges fell into 2 categories. One was extrinsic, which are things that are more to do with the student's living situation that are very external, and intrinsic, which again are more internal and may correlate with mental health. And the thing that we noticed is that on extrinsic issues, students and faculty agreed quite closely, but on intrinsic issues, faculty often underestimated the extent to which students were dealing with an issue. And this is concerning for 2 reasons. One, that faculty don't know what challenges students are facing. But on the other hand, that students are able to communicate challenges, but they're either choosing not to, or faculty aren't perceiving these challenges as serious. And we wanted to look more into this gap and start understanding why it was occurring. In a continuation of the same survey, we looked at a lot of faculty responses of what their students' concerns were, and many of them simply didn't know. For example, they were strangely silent when talking about students. And because faculty don't know what student concerns are, they aren't able to address them, and they aren't able to improve the course. So this helps give us some insight into where that gap was, that students simply weren't able to or were choosing not to communicate. But it still doesn't explain why we have this gap between extrinsic and intrinsic issues, because we were able to see that students can communicate some issues clearly. So we moved towards the student surveys to find out why that was. Many students express feelings of depression, anxiety, or feeling overwhelmed with the transition to online learning. One student simply wrote, "I can stop feeling sorry for myself," when they were asked what they could do to help themselves learn more. We know that mental health issues are prevalent in college well before coronavirus, as we saw from the National College Health Assessment, which found that in 2018, 40% of college students had experienced depression that made it difficult to function, and 60% had experienced overwhelming anxiety in the last 12 months. So these are issues that well predate coronavirus and are likely the root of this severe motivation issue that we saw. This also gives us some explanation for the gap between student and faculty communication. One student wrote that they felt guilty for feeling unmotivated, which suggests why they may not have chosen to share that or felt comfortable reaching out. When students blame themselves for their issues, it's much harder to rely on others to fix them or to reach out to someone else. As we saw from the broader data set, these issues were pervasive in the move to online learning, and many students experienced them. And as we know from previous data, this is a common problem in college. So our goal then is, how do we prevent students from dealing with these issues on their own? And to do that, we move towards our recommendations. We would recommend that faculty reach out to students at regular intervals to check in with them about the class and their mental health more broadly. So this is an example survey that's been used by the Department of Electrical Engineering that asks what's going well, what could be improved, what can the faculty member and the student do to help them learn better. And the goal of this is, on one hand, to help build that link of communication, but it also gives faculty more frequent and helpful feedback throughout the course of the semester, that they can continue to improve and refine their course. And we believe that this can help both faculty teach better, as well as students feel like they have a stronger support network and be more comfortable reaching out, as well as helping to destigmatize the conversation around mental health, because it's normalized to talk about what issues students are experiencing. So our overall recommendations, once again, are to communicate course material clearly, concisely, and accurately, to carefully explain the relationship between course elements and how they fit together, and to regularly reach out to students. Our recommendations for the university more broadly would be to encourage faculty members to improve communication within their course with students, as well as to work towards destigmatizing the conversation around mental health at the University of Utah. And we hope that our recommendations can help the university moving forwards, help faculty teach their courses better, both during coronavirus and afterwards. Thank you for your time.